Welcome to the Candle Business Coach Podcast, a show about the craft of candle making and small business. I'm your host, Kirsty Allen, and I'm a candle maker, mum of three, and kindness advocator. Join me as I dive into all things candles and small business and deliver advice and tips to you in episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Are you on the list to get my daily motivation emails? Every day I'll send you a message that is designed to help keep you focused on taking action toward your goals. Sign up using the link in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by my free ebook, the Candle Business Marketing Kickstarter Kit. Inside this free ebook, you'll learn to identify your blocks of time to dedicate to your candle business. Plus, there are several tips and tricks for re-engaging past customers and attracting new customers into your business so you can grow your business and reach your goals. Check out the link in the show notes for your copy. Welcome back to the podcast, my friend. Today we have the lovely Andrea from Dream Accounting to chat to us about money, tax, and accounting tips that you can implement into your candle business. So, Andrea, would you like to say hello to the listeners?
I'd love to. So, I'm Andrea. I am a humour-based person. Yeah. Hello, everybody. We're really looking forward to having a bit of a chat about the things that I'm super passionate about, numbers and business. So, let's get into it.
Perfect. So speaking of numbers in business, how did you get started or how did you become involved in the accounting realm? Like, why is this a passion for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I'll cut it short, but I tried to do some study in some other areas that were more exotic. And what I realised over the journey was that it was the accounting subjects, as boring as everyone else thought they were, that were actually what I enjoyed doing and what I was good at. So eventually I completed my degree after several starts of other ones, and it's just been an ongoing journey since then.
I love it. It's so good that when you find something you're passionate about, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. It's about what lights you up and what makes you, get out of bed every morning. So it's good that 100%. You've found your passion.
Absolutely.
So tell us about Dream Accounting. I'd love to hear the origin story and the meaning behind the name.
Yeah, sure. Dream Accounting, I originally started with a different name, but it didn't quite capture us the way I intended. So the background is that I don't do status quo. So it always needed to be something that was different and something that would stand out. And I was deliberating over it for a long time. I was actually walking through Target one day and I saw a wooden sign that said Dream. And I'm one to trust intuition, and so Dream Accounting was born.
I love that. That's such a nice story. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty because I know that there's going to be plenty of people that are interested in finding out some information about how to make and run their business as efficiently as possible. But for those that are still in the hobby stage of their business, one of the questions that's been asked or that I'd love to know your thoughts on is whether they can claim anything on tax.
It's a good question and one that we probably need to nail out straight away. So the reality is that we can always offset any income that we derive from a source with expenses that are incurred in that space. So the simple answer to you is yes, but in the preliminary stages of business, we are limited to only claiming against that business income. So we can't offset it against our other income sources until we reach certain tests. The easiest one and the most easiest one to explain is a turnover of 20,000. If we get to that point and we have expenses that exceed our candle business income, then we can also offset some of our other income from other sources.
Amazing. So 20,000 is the key number.
It is if we're generating losses, but let it be known that in any other case, we can always offset the profits of the business. So yes, we are claiming them, but whether you'll see tax benefit or not will depend on being able to pass these other tests.
So I guess one point I'd like to make early on is with all the things we talk about today, this is general advice, and it'd be best for people to speak to their individual accountants to get some advice that's specific to their business and their situation.
Absolutely. I know a good one.
So do I. So when setting up our business, what entity do you think a candle maker should be?
Yeah, another great question. And my favourite answer to most of these things is it depends, but I'll try and go into it a little bit more. So when we're trying to establish what structure is best for a business, we need to weigh it up against the risks that are involved in that business and what other assets we might own personally. Because as a sole trader, we are exposing our whole life, basically. We are the business is us, and we just need to be mindful of it. So there are other structures that we can use that are their own being in themselves, but we need to probably establish the viability of a business first and really weigh up the ongoing costs of different structures. So it's usually my advice that we're starting small, that we start as a sole trader. We can always progress to another entity, particularly with a business model like a candle business, because they usually start small and grow from that point. It's usually one person involved. When we're dealing with staff and we're dealing with bigger enterprise, then we definitely move towards the entity. But for the best part, a startup, getting those solid foundations and getting the business reputation up is probably best placed in a sole trader capacity.
Yeah, fantastic. I feel like many of the listeners are in that position at the moment where they are operating the business by themselves, but it's good and important to look ahead and see what's potentially coming up and what you need to be prepared for as well.
Absolutely. And look, sometimes it can be a progression and almost a goal to get to a point where you need to establish an entity. Yeah. That can help with the strategic goal setting and the long game that I talk a lot about. So, yeah, while it doesn't need to be done immediately because it can be a crippling expense in the early days. And the other thing I always bring up is that once we birth, say, a company, which is usually my recommendation, that just doesn't go away. We have that existence. We have it in existence. And so we need to be really sure that we're in this for the long game before we do something like that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people will dabble in candle making and other businesses as well before they fully commit and stick with it for the long term. So it makes sense to be a sole trader to begin with, and then as your business progresses, the entity comes into play.
Correct, and as your risk increases and as your personal assets increase, it's over time.
Yeah, definitely. Would you recommend a certain amount of cash on hand when starting a business?
About $1 million.
Yeah.
I don't think there's ever enough. Look, one point that I do make a lot is that we I don't know how it comes about, but often we are under the impression that we need to generate enough profits to cover our business and grow our business from those profits. Now, that can be very challenging and almost defeating in itself, because it's very rare that a business will start off making these amazing profits to reinvest and be able to pay the bills. So we need to be prepared to invest a certain amount, time as well as finances, to get the tools to grow. So I make the analogy of a term deposit. We don't put $1 into a term deposit and intend it to turn into $10,000 overnight. Yeah, it's a slow progression. And therefore, we can't expect our business to generate the kind of profits or any profit initially when we're spending big amounts on growing it and acquiring long-term assets.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and so look, to answer your question, it could vary, but it would be enough to be able to pay your bills without relying on profit for maybe a couple of months.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when we're running our business as a side hustle, can we claim equipment on tax?
Yeah, great question. So we circle back to what we spoke about. The answer is yes, but unless we are meeting the rules that I previously spoke about, the loss will be called what's quarantined. So let's take a valid example and say that we've had $10,000 worth of sales and we've bought or incurred expenses running that business of $20,000. So we don't pay any tax on the $10,000 profit because it's been completely offset by the losses that we've incurred, the expenses we've incurred. And then in addition to that, we've got an extra $10,000 that we simply carry forward in your tax return, and you will be able to offset that against future profits of the business. If you had a side hustle and you were working for wages or something somewhere else, and you had $20,000 worth of income, and you had $30,000 worth of expenses, that $10,000 loss could then be used to offset your wage and salary income.
Amazing.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And I love how it works that way. You sort of think, like, when you think of tax in the government, it's like they're out to get you in and it's all not to be in your favor. But something
Yes.
like that actually means that it works both ways. So it benefits.
It does. And the legislation around it, for those of you that are interested, is called the non-commercial loss rule. So there's always something behind why these provisions in place. And it's certainly not to get candle business owners. It's for people that are probably very wealthy and on purpose generating losses in a side hustle in an attempt to offset their otherwise large income. Yeah. So they say that, the $20,000 of sales is a way of saying, yes, this is a commercial enterprise. It's just one of about 5 things to pass, but for this type of business, it's the easiest one to pass. So you can see why they do it. You're like, okay, yeah?
Yeah, that makes sense. So what other tax deductions can we take advantage of as a candle business owner?
Great question. So, and this is relevant for all businesses. So I break it down to the legislation that comes through for us, and what it's called is a positive limb and a negative limb. So a positive limb is one where we can claim a deduction because it is incurred in earning assessable income, full stop. A negative is one that is nothing to do with earning assessable income. So what might be deductible to one business might not be deductible to another, just simply because of the business activity. Okay, so I can tell you that as a candle business, the cost of manufacturing, the cost of acquiring things, the equipment, the advertising, the subscriptions, and potentially some home office warehouse costs can be deducted. But it all comes down, when we think of the simplicity of it, to, is this actually incurred in deriving assessable income?
Yeah. So there's a few hurdles to overcome to be able to claim different things on tax.
Correct. Yes. I mean, there are some generic ones that we all know, and people are always, potentially looking for other additional things that they might not know. If we break it back down to that and go, well, is this, or at least is part of this for business-related purposes? Is it part of this for private purposes? And there can be an apportionment. So maybe it is that you've travelled to go and see a manufacturer. Okay, yes, we can claim it, but maybe it's that we only claim 20% of it. Yeah. The tax office wants to see us be reasonable. And that's the words they use, reasonable apportionment. So it's not that it's not deductible. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some tax implications of selling candles online versus in person?
Ooh, look, again, when we break it down to what it is, a sale is a sale. So the reality is people talk about, and this might go into some of your other questions, talk about a hobby, it's just a hobby, therefore I don't need to pay tax on it. The reality is that a hobby is that has come about because usually our expenses will offset any profit that we make. So it's not that a hobby is not taxable, it's just that because it's our passion and we're doing it not just for the purpose of earning money and a profit, is that there's a lot of expenses that we would otherwise incur. So the reality is, if you made $5,000 selling candles, you should be including in your tax return. Outside of that is that there's travel expenses, there's stalls, there's online fees, there's all these things. And so it becomes too hard for people to even try and collate the information, that they just go, it's a hobby, I'm not putting it in, knowing that it's completely offset. We've got the issue of using, merchants like Square and different merchant facilities. They're now reporting to the tax office. So we could see a time where the tax office are asking questions about anything that's being paid electronically and are looking to see it in a tax return. Yeah. But we need to remember that we're probably not going to pay tax on it. It's merely the exercise of collating the information that's paid in the butt.
Yeah. Okay. That's really, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So this hobby thing, people go, how much can I earn before I don't treat it as a hobby? Well, that's not actually, there is no guidance on that. It's not a dollar value. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you give us any suggestions on how to set up our bank accounts?
I can. So again, we don't want to overwhelm people that are new to business. I love, what I call bank balance accounting, and it's the same rationale as profit first, barefoot investor type thing. And it's about separating out some of our outgoings and some of our incomings so that we can feel like we have some control. in a world that's otherwise pretty chaotic. Yeah. But when we get to a point where we are, it is having a negative effect on our mindset because we haven't got enough money to spread into these areas, then we need to rethink and go, am I creating more chaos for myself? So I would definitely have a separate account for my incomings coming in. So that way you know exactly what's coming in. Everyone pays into that account. And then my recommendation is to have various accounts underneath that you would transfer out of the income account and allocate to different bank accounts. Now, I have about 8 of them, but for a startup business, it might just be as simple as having 2, one for expenses and one for, profit, or one for income tax. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are other people that really like to know that they've got a big bank account balance and that's growing, and that works for them. That's totally okay as well.
Yeah. So it comes down to personal choice.
And it's not imperative from a tax agent point of view in terms of preparing tax. That doesn't necessarily help us do it any more efficiently. It's about helping business owners to manage cash flow and have some clarity about where their reserves lie. It's the old envelope system that's been around forever.
Yes. It's about empowering ourselves to have knowledge about what our finances are doing, where our money is going and where it's coming from as well.
Absolutely. I've had many instances where people are putting a fairly large amount away in their income tax account because they are petrified of having a big income tax bill. And the reality was they didn't need to put that much aside. And then they were like, this is not worth it. I'm not doing it. And so that is the thing that I'm talking about, where it can affect mindset. I've had others that have, got ridiculous profits, haven't even thought about income tax and got anything set aside. So it's somewhere in the middle.
Yes, and we want to be in that middle ground.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we can keep track of our expenses and income to make sure that we're reporting accurately?
Yes, look, I recommend accounting software for that reason, and I think you'll probably go on around that, but I can cover it now. Xero is my preferred software, just because it's just a superior product and there's a lot out there, and the others work. Yeah, don't get me wrong. The others work side by side. They look the same. They've got all the same functionality, but I find Xero really help see the information that we need. And so when we put things into an accounting platform such as Xero, but it could be, QuickBooks, MyHub, I'm not affiliated with any of them specifically, we are making sure that we don't miss anything. And so the data comes in from your bank accounts, and so there's no longer the data entry that once was years ago. And so we have the date, we have the amount, and we have the supplier right there. It's our audit trail in itself. So if we're putting things into a spreadsheet, there's room for error. It may have been paid from somewhere else and we miss it. When we consolidate and use bank accounts or several bank accounts, we know we capture it all. And Xero does a fantastic job of keeping that all together.
Yeah. Would you recommend starting with Xero or a different accounting software from the very beginning of your business journey?
Yes, I don't think there's any reason to delay. Again, it comes down to the budget of the person that's doing it, because, a $20 a month subscription can feel like a big expense for a business. I challenge that to say it's one of the ones that you need to have in order, again, to get the mindset right. I'm doing this. This is the real deal. I need the tools that a business owner uses. So, yeah, that's the angle I come across. But, it doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles. It can grow with you. When we're sole traders in business without staff, we don't need, a high platform of Xero. There are some smaller ledgers and light products that are available through tax agents that are far cheaper than the ones that you'll see on the website.
Yes, and it's so important, like we spoke on before, for that mindset to know what's happening with our money. And if we can rely on a program such as Xero to be able to capture all the data, it's just one less thing for us to worry about or have to spend time inputting that information ourselves.
Oh, I completely agree, but it does rely on you using the same bank account to pay for your business expenses. So it starts with that. So have a distinct bank account. That's my number one thing to any business, is have a distinct bank account. And from there, we are having the audit trail, because we pay electronically for just about everything we do now, and try and keep your personal transactions out of it. Like, as a sole trader, you will need to take money from it and you'll need to put money into it. but have transfers in and out for that. Spend, KFC, whatever, outside, and keep every transaction that happens in that account relevant to your business, keeps it clean. You know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes sense to have that separation between personal and business, again, for that mindset aspect.
Absolutely. Yep. And these are the things that we can do, again, in the journey of becoming probably the empire that we want. This gives us those first steps. This is how it starts. This is how everyone starts. We've all been in the same place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not like you become an empire and then think, oh, I need to purchase some accounting software.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
No, that's not a pretty situation.
No, and you want to have the right foundations. And I feel like, especially like having you on the podcast today, it's about educating the listeners and candle makers specifically on what foundations are required to then build the business upon. And if you can get that right from beginning or from close to the beginning, you set yourself up for success for the future.
You absolutely do. And it's like there is no shortcuts in this journey we call business. We do need to do the things and we need to learn the lessons ourselves. It's great to say that we've got the answers, but every single person will encounter setbacks, will encounter failures. Like it's just part of the roller coaster. And so while we have these tools, they will at least help us see those quicker and address them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more about knowing where the errors could be and how to forecast them and plan for them rather than suddenly having a huge tax bill and going, oh, where did that come from? I had no idea. If you know that it's coming, you can set money aside up until it's due.
Yep.
It's less stressful for you too.
Yeah, it all comes down to measuring, yeah? It's not good, bad or otherwise, but we need a benchmark to be able to grow or to be able to make any decisions. Without that information, we can't make informed decisions.
Yes, we need to be educated on our own finances, which is, speaking from a woman's perspective, like we're not necessarily taught to make this a priority in our life. So if we're starting businesses, we need to know about our finances. We need to know how accounts work, how accounting software works, and how just the whole business comes together.
I completely agree. And it's not as boring as you think, people. Yeah.
Yeah, we're having a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you start your candle business, there are so many things to consider and research along the way, especially when it comes to choosing the right suppliers. Long Story Short provides all your design and printing needs, from your logo and branding to designing and printing your product labels. The quality is exceptional, the customer service is amazing, and prices are very reasonable. They're the only label company I recommend, so check out their website or send them an email today to get started. hello@longstoryshortdesign.com.au. So what are some things we should actually be measuring to check if we're on the right track with our business?
Great question. So everyone will glaze over when I say the words gross profit, but it's important, okay? So gross profit is simply put the difference between what your sales, all of your sales together, and what it costs you to make the product that you're selling. I'm talking about products specifically for candle businesses. So that in itself, that calculation is much easier to calculate than you think, because we look at all our costs together and we go, well, I've made a loss. Not helpful information, because generally speaking, you will make a loss. So all that does is just make you go, why am I doing this? So what we need to look at, and even go deeper, gross profit on each product, okay? So what you're selling it for and what it's costing you to make it. Then in addition to that, and this is basically a profit and loss that I'm stepping you through, is expenses that we call overhead expenses, which are incurred for the business overall. So we're talking about subscriptions, we're talking about, OneDrive access, we're talking about a computer, the things that are needed. And we spread those out over the products that we're selling. And there's different methods that I teach that allow that to happen. But it's not going to matter if that gross profit is not right. So we need to make sure that what it costs you is not, that there is margin in there. That's gross profit margin. And for something like this, I would be suggesting that we need to have a fairly substantial gross profit margin, like at least 50%. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
More, because as we grow, the overheads increase, and your price needs to be able to tolerate that being added in at the top line. So I challenge people to say, well, I sell it for this price and then everything else falls into line. I challenge you to go the other way and go, well, these are my expenses. This is what it costs me to make this thing, and I want a 50% margin. Therefore, my price is this, rather than the other way around. Yeah.
Yes.
We're in charge.
Yes. And that's unfortunately one of the things that I've come across with many of the candle makers is that there's that scarcity mindset and the fear of, if I price my candles too high, I won't get any sales. So I'll price them low to get a sale, but then they're not even covering their costs, and there's no room for profit. There's no room for error. And it's about, again, educating. You need to make sure that you're covering your costs at a minimum and then building in that margin as well.
That's exactly right. We're fearful that we're not going to make a sale, but a sale at a loss is actually a loss. No sale at all is not. Yeah. We have to change our mentality around it and be a standout. Be the person that is not afraid to charge what you're worth, because we can look at all our competitors and say that's what they're charging, that's what the market will pay. But how do we know? Yeah. Are you unique? Do you stand out? Do you have a point of difference? If you do, then own it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. This is probably a question you might not be able to answer, but how much money should be put aside for tax time? And does it just depend on how much earnings we've made?
It really does. And it depends on what other income that you have in your personal name if we're operating as a sole trader. So when we think about I'm waving my hands here, but I know you can't see me. We have what we call marginal tax brackets in Australia. And so what that means is that for the first $20,000 of your income, you don't pay tax. The next 25 up to a taxable income of $45,000, you pay 21% tax, okay? So if you've got a salary of up to, let's call it $40,000, and you have then made a $5,000 profit. Now, profit is different to sales, and we've talked about that. Then you would be looking to put tax aside for that $5,000 that's on top of your already 40 of 21% because the marginal tax rate. Now, the next step up from that, from 45,000 up to 120, is 32.5%. So it does depend on your other income. And this is where people with a side hustle can get stuck, because the business in its own right is not generating amazing profits. But when we add that onto the other income, the tax implications of that can be higher. It's not a reason not to do it, but we need to take your entire income into account.
Yeah, of course. It's not just, they're not separate things that we're being assessed on.
But remember that we've got the calculation that sits alongside a business schedule is a separate part of the tax return that we complete. It could be that your candle business doesn't make a profit and that it's a loss, and that loss is quarantined, in which case no income tax will be payable on that. We won't get the tax benefit unless we've reached 20,000, but we also won't need to put tax aside. So it's not about the sales you make, it's about the profit we're reporting.
Yes, definitely. Can we minimize our tax liability?
Yes, and that comes down to making sure that you understand what is a tax deduction to you, as we spoke about positive and negative limbs, and just making the most of the expenses that you're incurring. Like, I would never encourage people to make purchases just to get the tax benefit. We need to come back to the reason why we're doing this, and it's not to save tax year to year. So tax minimisation, in my view, is just making sure that you have thorough understanding and you're not missing out, as opposed to having a strategy distinctly to not pay tax.
That doesn't sit right, does it? Yeah. So in Australia, we have GST. Could you explain how and when to register for that? Like, when does it come into play?
I'd love to. This is one of my favourite topics. So GST, Goods and Services Tax, is a tax that businesses are asked to charge on products for the end user. So what that means is that we will see in the things that we buy that often there is a GST component to that. Now, any business can voluntarily register for GST and charge GST on behalf of the government. However, businesses that seeming to be earning over $75,000 in sales, remember the sales, in a 12-month period looking forward. So not financial year, not in the past. We're talking about forecasting for the future. So $6,000, $7,000 months in sales, have an obligation to register and charge GST. Okay, so it's a choice that can be made up until the point that you are forecasting to have over 75,000. Okay, so when we register for GST, it means that we need to charge an extra 10% on our prices to achieve the same sale price for us, because the GST is charged, but then it's paid directly to the tax office. So as a benefit of being a tax collector for the ATO, businesses are also entitled to claim any GST that they are charged through their expenses as a credit. So Telstra, for example, will charge GST. If my expense is in the course of running my business and there's GST in it, I claim a tax credit back for that. So our BAS, which is how we report this to the tax office, ends up being the difference between those two, what I owe and what I can claim back, because we are a tax collector for the tax office. Now, what I find with a lot of businesses, and candle businesses would probably fit into this area, is that most of our clients, and correct me if I'm wrong here, are end user consumers. Yeah. So when the private person is having to pay GST, like I just explained, they can't claim it back. So it means a price increase or a price higher when we're registered for GST. So we have an obligation when we get to a certain point that we need to do it. But up until that point, it really is probably not beneficial to register, simply because it takes you out of that competitive price range. Yeah. So another example would be a hairdresser who suddenly has to register for GST, did charge $30 a haircut, now needs to charge $33, and everyone's whinging about a price increase. Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be strategic when we roll it out, when we're a business to consumer, B2C business.
Yes, that makes sense. And it's so important to learn and educate yourself about what your implications are as your business revenue grows and you get close to that threshold. And this is why it's so important to have an accountant such as yourself to be able to help guide you through the process, because if you try and navigate it yourself, it's a minefield.
I've had lots of businesses that think they should need to register for GST that really didn't need to at that point. I mean, again, we want to get to the place where we have to charge GST, because that means that we're earning that amount, or we're selling that amount. Great goal to have, but let's not make it harder for ourselves in the interim.
Yeah, exactly. It's a milestone to look forward to.
Yeah. Another thing to note here, that sales threshold is simply for sales within a business for an ABN. It can be a variety of different business activities conducted under that ABN, but it has absolutely nothing to do with the other income that you may be getting from salary and wages. That's completely outside. We don't need to use that in our calculation of 75,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. How do we pay ourselves a wage? How do we factor that in?
Yeah. So let me explain first and foremost that a sole trader cannot employ themselves. So when we think of the usual term wages, we refer to putting it through a payroll system and paying superannuation on it and all the other complications that can come with having an employee. As a sole trader, you need to do that for people that are arm's length, but you cannot employ yourself. Doesn't mean that we can't budget and look to be paying ourselves a distinct amount out of the business that we can refer to as wages in inverted commas. Okay. So it's not a tax deduction to the business to pay yourself out of the business. You as a sole trader will pay tax on the profit that's there, regardless of whether you take it out for yourself or not. But it can be really meaningful and good practice to be taking an amount out so you feel like that you're benefiting from the business.
Yes, rather than everything going back in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Following on from that, how do we pay ourselves super?
Another great question. So as a sole trader, in the same way that you can't pay yourself wages, you are therefore under no obligation to pay superannuation for yourself. However, you can, as a sole trader, as an everyday person, claim a tax deduction for any amounts that you put into super. Okay. So you can absolutely do it. It's just not done in the same way as employers do it for employees. It's called a personal contribution, and you can put in up to $27,500 per year and claim a tax deduction for it. It's actually a really good tax deduction if the cash is available for it, provided that your income is like you are paying tax overall. So yes, it's an absolutely, ask me more about that if I haven't elaborated enough. But yeah, it's a great thing to do, but no obligation to do it.
I think especially as women, we take time away from the workforce to have a family. Our super accounts, our wages are different to our male counterparts. So if we have the capacity to put extra money into our super, then that would be something that we'd recommend that you're able to do.
And that falls outside the scope of the business itself. So when I was explaining, what the profit is and what the business is, a superannuation deduction will come off your other income. Yeah. So if you're at a $45,000 income and you put $1,000 into super, you will save $320 in tax, 32%.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, here and now. There is tax to be paid in super fund, but I won't overcomplicate it with that.
Are there some common financial pitfalls or mistakes that you see product-based businesses make?
The biggest one would have to be the not understanding of the gross profit margin and, slaving. And probably the second one is not recognising the value of time, or that time is money. So while we are creating something and we think our costs are this, if you weren't doing that for nothing because you were trying to grow this business, what value or what cost does your time have? Because when we step out of a business and allow somebody else to do it, which is inevitably what we want to be at least able to do at certain times of the year, if not all the time, if it can't be sustained, then the pricing's not right. There has to be an element of labour that needs to be put into our pricing.
Yes. Yeah, especially if we start to hire, assistants or part-time employees.
Yeah, because that is not the time to raise the prices when I suddenly have staff I need to pay. We need to, and this is the benefit of the startup phase, is that we have the ability to go, right, I need to be able to get this price to be this to tolerate this, rather than the other way around.
Do you think that mindset and self-worth comes into pricing?
100%. I couldn't elaborate that more. It is the biggest killer of businesses. Like I say that really passionately and heavily because, and it is the status quo. And it is, if this is what my competitor is charging, then this is all I can charge. And then you suddenly have to try and fit in all the expenses, which is actually taken away from your point of difference, because you had an amazing product, but now you can't make it amazing because you can't make it for that much money. Yeah. So it all comes down to trust and belief in what you've got.
Yeah. Both in life and
own
business.
That.
Yeah.
But again, it's part of the business journey that we all have the imposter syndrome. We all have, that guilt that comes with even being successful. So we need to be able to work on that and be constantly evolving. And it doesn't go away. I have it. It's always there. But when we're aware of it and we can shine the torch of awareness on it, then we can start to do something about it. And it won't be just overnight going, I'm going to double my prices. It might be that you start speaking the words to say, my expenses are high. I need to charge this. Like, own it. Like, we don't have to pretend we've got our stuff together. We can be vulnerable. Yeah.
There's such beauty in vulnerability as well. And being honest and open, not only with yourself, but with others as well. Yeah.
Like it's different to being a victim and going, I can't do this as a staff. It's more about, like ownership, responsibility. We actually have, as business owners, a responsibility to keep this sustainable. If I don't do this well and make money, I can't continue to give this to my people. Yeah. If we think about it from that point of view, I can't charge any less because then people don't get what I have to offer because I can't continue to make losses. Yeah.
Yeah. you're not running a charity, which I'm sure they still run their charity business, the right way with the right foundation.
Absolutely, they still need to cover their costs. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you share any other general information or tips about running a business?
General information. Oh, look, you could have me here all day. Like the biggest one is just knowing that it is a journey, that it's up and down. It's a roller coaster. It is a crazy roller coaster. It's exhilarating and it's depressing as hell at different times. And it can all happen in the course of a day.
Yeah.
you are not alone when you feel like, why am I doing this? And you're also not alone when you're euphoric because, Shopify's dinged you. Yeah. Like it's all part of it. Surround yourself with people that get it from time to time. Yeah. Because not everyone is entrepreneurial, and we have people that try to keep us safe. But when you surround yourself with the others that are willing to break the mold, they're willing to crush the glass ceiling, then you'll go further. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So we've come to one of my favorite parts of the podcast where I ask all my guests 3 questions specifically about candles. So Number 1, what is your favorite candle fragrance?
Let me ask you, do you think that I'm going to say a specific one? No, she's not boxing me. Like, wouldn't an accountant would have to be vanilla for sure? Yeah.
No, that would be like the last scent that you would choose.
So I didn't think about this. I'm glad I got the heads up about this one because it probably would have been put on the spot. My favorite candle scent is I don't know how to describe it, but linen, like fresh.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
Really love that smell of, fresh sunshine, clean linen.
Yes, that's
is that a scent? Is that
it is. Yeah. You can get like cotton scent and linen scent fragrance oils. So yeah.
Yeah.
Number 2, what do you love about candles?
Well, I like this one as well. It's interesting enough that I did a speech yesterday and I used a candle as an analogy.
Oh, wow. Yeah. For International Women's Day as well.
Yeah. Story for another day. But for me, candles represent hope. Look, they can change the mood of a room or people and create atmosphere. But for me, the actual thing itself, the flame, how amazing is that? Yeah. The way that it moves, the way that it does its own thing, imperfectly perfect. Love.
Yeah. Just like us. Everyone. Yeah.
Yes.
And then number 3 is, what is one piece of advice you'd like to give to candle makers during their journey?
Contemplation here. My one piece of advice would have to be trust your gut. It is use your superpowers that you have inside of you. Strategy, planning, all the things that I do, numbers are all super important. They're just one side though. We've got another whole side here of desire, of intuition, of imagination. You need to use both. Don't rely just on a piece of paper or an expert, even though I'm amazing. Bring them both together. Yin, yang business.
Yeah, trust your gut. That is perfect.
Yeah.
And it's so true. Like when we step into trusting ourselves and following those butterflies, that's when the magic happens. That's when
100%.
Things unfold for us and life just flows so much easily when we sit in that space rather than in a fear or a scarcity mindset where we feel stuck and stagnant.
That's right. And I think it's a dance between those two, because you can't be completely in the feminine energy and go, she'll be right, head in sand. But we can't be so far in the masculine energy that we're relying entirely on the numbers. When we can have both, magic.
Yes, I love that. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I've loved chatting about accounting and tax and money and all things finances.
All the things.
The things.
My pleasure. I love this stuff.
So good. So for the listeners that might want to connect in with you and perhaps utilize your services, where can they find more about you?
Yeah, so I'm very proud of our website. It's probably encapsulates us the most. So www.dreamaccounting.com.au is where you'll find the sexiest photos of me. But we're clearly on the social platforms as well, so the typical places. But yeah, you can email us, you can Facebook message us, and we would love to hear from anyone that just wants to say hey even.
Love it. I will leave all the links in the show notes. And thank you so much again for being part of the podcast today.
You're so very welcome.
Thanks everyone for listening today. I hope this episode added value to your candle making journey. Check out the show notes for all the links mentioned throughout today's show, and please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for listening. Have a beautiful day.